With a heavy heart, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching Robert pack his briefcase. Our once happy home now felt suffocated by a thick cloud of tension that seemed to choke the life out of our relationship. My voice, barely more than a whisper, struggled to break through the silence. "I can't believe you're doing this," I said, my voice trembling. Robert glanced up, his eyes cold. "Olivia, what?" "I'm heading into the office. This family needs someone to keep things going." His words were a painful reminder of the decision I had made just days earlier, cutting deep into my heart. I stepped further into the room, trying to steady my emotions. "You know that's not fair," I said, feeling the anger simmering inside me. "I quit my job for us, for our family." Robert's frustration was evident as he snapped his briefcase shut. "No, you left your job because you couldn't handle the strain. Now you expect me to pick up the slack too." His words hit hard, and I winced, knowing there was some truth in them. Adjusting to life as a stay-at-home mother had been difficult, but I never imagined the depth of Robert's resentment. "I'm trying, Robert," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "It's not easy giving up a career I loved." He sighed heavily and ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not looking for a fight tonight. We need to talk about some serious things." The sound of small footsteps padding down the hallway interrupted us before we could continue. Our daughter Lily appeared, clutching her teddy bear and rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Mommy, Daddy, why are you fighting?" I knelt down to her level, forcing a smile. "We're not fighting, sweetheart. Daddy and I were just talking." Robert picked her up and kissed her forehead. "Your mom's right, princess. Everything is fine. Why don't you go find Grandma? I bet she's making pancakes." As Lily ran off, I felt a pang of regret. How many times had she overheard our arguments? Robert set his briefcase down, his expression softening slightly. "All right, tonight we'll talk. I have an idea that might help us get back on track." I nodded, unable to find the words. A gnawing feeling told me that something was deeply wrong between us. As Robert left for work, I couldn't shake the dread about the conversation we were going to have that night and what it might mean for our future. The day dragged on with endless dull chores and my in-laws' constant chatter, leaving me uneasy and anxious. By the time Robert returned home and the kids were asleep, we retreated to the study after dinner. Breaking the silence, he leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. "I've been thinking about how we can tackle some of our challenges." I raised an eyebrow, feeling a knot form in my stomach as Robert smiled slightly and nodded. "What if we use some of our savings to buy my parents a house?" he suggested. "They could move closer, help with the kids, and lighten the load for both of us." I felt the air leave the room as his words sank in. "Our savings?" I questioned him. "What about the funds we set aside for our future? For the kids' college?" Robert's smile faded. "I thought you'd be happy about this," he said, his tone defensive. "It solves a lot of our problems." "Or just your problems with your parents," I retorted, raising my voice. Robert's face tightened with frustration as he stood up. "Why do you have to make everything so difficult? This is the best thing for our family." I watched in disbelief as he stormed out of the room. Was this really happening? Had he seriously proposed spending our life savings on a house for his parents without even consulting me? Feeling more isolated than ever, I buried my face in my hands. How had we come to this point? The next morning, I heard hushed voices coming from the kitchen. I cautiously walked down the hall, careful not to step on the creaky floorboard. "Mom, she's being unreasonable," Robert said, his voice clear. I thought she'd be on board with this plan. His mother responded in a calm, patronizing tone, "Oh, Robert, some women just aren't cut out for the demands of family life. Not everyone is suited for it." I bit my lip, battling the surge of hurt and anger welling up inside me. Is that how they saw me? Incapable? Weak? If we just move forward with the plans, maybe she'll come around, Robert suggested, sounding more resigned than hopeful. It's for the best. I couldn't take it any longer. I stormed into the kitchen, no longer willing to hide in the shadows. Robert, best for whom? Both of them jumped, their faces betraying a mix of guilt and surprise. His mother quickly recovered, plastering on a fake smile. Good morning, dear. How did you sleep? Ignoring her, I focused on Robert. Were you really planning to go behind my back on this? Or were you ever going to talk to me about it? Robert looked embarrassed, shifting uncomfortably. Olivia, it's not what it seems. We were just talking. Talking about making huge financial decisions without me. I cut him off. Decisions about our future, about our children. His mother, ever the peacemaker, interjected, now, let's not get too worked up. How about I take the kids to the park so you two can have some alone time? Before I could say anything, she was already calling out to Lily and Tom, ushering them out of the house. As the front door closed behind them, a tense silence filled the kitchen, hanging heavily between Robert and me. As soon as the front door closed, I spoke softly but firmly, you can't keep doing this, Robert. You can't continue to exclude me from decisions that affect our family. Robert sighed heavily, running his fingers through his hair. Olivia, I'm not shutting you out. I'm just trying to find solutions. I snapped back, unable to hold back my frustration. No, Robert. You've been the one pulling away. Ever since you convinced me to quit my job, saying I needed to focus on the family, you've treated me like a failure. I stepped back as he reached for me. That's not true, he said defensively. I thought this would make things easier. My parents could help with the kids, you'd get more support. More support. I laughed bitterly. Your father barely acknowledges me, and your mother can't hide her disdain. That's your idea of support? Robert's expression hardened. That's not fair. They've been trying to help since you stopped working. Help? I scoffed. You want to spend our savings to buy them a house, but I can't even make decisions about our own children without your mother undermining me. He raised his hands in frustration. What else can we do with it? The help is right there, and we need it. For the first time in months, I saw him clearly. This wasn't the man I had married. He had become someone else entirely. Robert, I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice breaking. I refuse to be excluded from my own family. His face softened slightly. Olivia, we can work this out. We have to, he started, but he was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening and the excited voices of our children filling the house. Daddy! Mommy! Look what we found at the park. Lily shouted as she ran into the kitchen, holding up a shiny pebble. I forced a smile, bending down to admire her treasure. But above her head, I caught the smug look on Robert's mother's face. She believed she had one. As I smiled at Lily, I made a silent vow to myself, this wasn't over. I wouldn't let them push me out of my own family. Something had to change, and soon. Later, sitting at the kitchen table, I stared at my laptop, watching emails and messages scroll by, reminders of the career I had left behind. My fingers itched to write a resume, to return to practicing law, where I had once been so successful. The sound of Robert's car pulling into the driveway snapped me back to reality. I quickly shut off the laptop, a wave of remorse washing over me. How had I ended up here? Wasn't this exactly what I had promised my family? When Robert walked in and saw me, his face lit up. There you are, he said cheerfully. I was thinking we could take the kids out to dinner tonight. What do you think? I forced a laugh. That sounds great. Where are the kids? Mom took them to the mall, he replied. She mentioned something about getting new school clothes. My lips twisted into a sarcastic smile. Did she? I thought we had planned to do that together this weekend. Robert shrugged, seemingly oblivious to my disappointment. Mom offered. I figured you could use a break. A break from my own children. I fought back tears, swallowing the hurt that threatened to overwhelm me. Robert, we need to talk about your parents and this whole situation. His shoulders tensed, and he let out a groan. Not this again, Olivia. I thought we were past all that. The past? I snapped, rising to my feet as anger surged within me. You mean the past where you keep making decisions on your own, especially about our savings? Robert's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Earlier, I overheard you on the phone. You were talking to a real estate agent, weren't you? Robert's face flushed with surprise. It was just a preliminary conversation. I was gathering information. Without talking to me first. I pressed, my voice hardening. He raked a hand through his hair, frustration evident. Olivia, what do you want from me? I'm trying to do what's best for our family. Our family, I repeated, emphasizing the word. Not your parents, not the idealized version of our family that your mother envisions. Us, Robert, me, you, and the kids. My parents are part of our family too, he shot back. Why can't you see that? Something inside me snapped. Because they're taking over, Robert. Your father ignores me at dinner, and your mother constantly criticizes my parenting. And you're letting it happen. Robert's face grew stern. That's not fair. They're only trying to help. I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it? When your mother undermines me at every turn, and your father barely acknowledges my presence? You're exaggerating, Robert muttered, though I could see doubt creeping into his eyes. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Does need to change, he said, his voice cold. But you need to accept that this is our life now, Olivia. My parents are here to stay, and we'll all be happier if you embrace that sooner rather than later. His words filled me with shock and sadness. I stared at him, struggling to comprehend how our marriage had reached this point. Was this really what it had become? Just then, the front door swung open, and the eager voices of our children echoed through the house, followed by Robert's mother's voice. We're back. Wait until you see what we bought. Robert turned to greet them, throwing me a look that made it clear our conversation was over. I stood there, paralyzed by the horrifying realization that this wasn't just about his parents anymore, this was about the future of our marriage. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if we even had one. Later, I sat at the desk in our shared study, a pen poised over a piece of paper. My heart pounded in the eerie stillness of the room. This was it, the breaking point. I glanced at the clock, 2:37 a.m. Robert, lost in sleep, had no idea how much our world was about to change. The kids, safely tucked in bed, were blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had been building for months. My hand trembled as I began to write, asterisk by the time you read this, Robert, the kids and I will be gone. I can't live like this any longer, asterisk. Tears blurred my vision as I poured years of grief, disappointment, and betrayal onto the page. I wrote about being ignored, about his parents' constant interference, about the dreams I had sacrificed, only to be treated as an outsider in my own home. A sob escaped me as I signed my name at the bottom of the letter, but I quickly stifled it, not wanting to wake anyone. This wasn't the future we had planned, and it certainly wasn't the life I had envisioned. But life changes, people change, and sometimes you have to summon the courage to change your own story. I carefully folded the letter and placed it on Robert's desk, where he would easily find it in the morning. Quietly, I made my way upstairs. "Mommy," I whispered, gently shaking Lily awake. She murmured sleepily, rubbing her eyes. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart," I lied softly. "We're going on a little trip. Can you help me with your brother? Be a big girl for me." Still half asleep, she nodded. Tom, the lighter sleeper of the two, was easier to wake. Within minutes, I had them both dressed, their beloved stuffed animals clutched tightly in their little arms. I held my breath as we quietly made our way down the stairs, praying that Robert wouldn't wake up. His snoring from the bedroom, once a comforting sound, now felt like a cruel reminder of how distant we had become. The man I once loved more than anything now felt like a stranger. We made it to the car without incident, but as I strapped the kids into their seats, Lily's small voice broke through the stillness of the night. "Where's Daddy, Mommy? Isn't he coming with us?" Even though I had expected the question, it still caught me off guard. I froze for a moment before forcing a calm response. "No, sweetheart. Daddy has to stay here, but don't worry, we'll see him soon." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to shatter their reality just yet. As I slid into the driver's seat, something caught my eye. I looked up and saw Robert's mother standing in the upstairs window, her gaze fixed on me. Time seemed to freeze as our eyes locked. I saw the spark of realization, a flicker of anger, and, shockingly, a glimmer of satisfaction in her expression. Without giving it more thought, I started the engine and drove away, navigating the lonely, dark streets with trembling hands gripping the steering wheel. My mind raced with endless questions. Where were we going? What would we do next? How would we survive this? But when I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw my children peacefully sleeping, a wave of calm washed over me. We would figure it out. We had to. As the first light of dawn began to break, my phone buzzed. Seeing Robert's name on the screen sent a chill through me. His message was brief but chilling, *, you have no right to take my kids. My lawyer will be in touch. Olivia, you won't get away with this, *. His words only strengthened my resolve. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, knowing there was no turning back now. I would face whatever came next, for the sake of my children and myself. As the sun rose, painting the sky with a hopeful light, I allowed myself a small smile. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a new chapter in our story. Exhaustion weighed heavily on me as I pulled into the parking lot of a rundown motel. Despite everything, my children's faces were serene as they slept soundly in the back seat. I rested my head on the steering wheel, feeling the weight of it all, tears threatening to spill over. Just then, I heard a gentle tap on the window. Startled, I looked up to see a familiar face peering in. It was Ella, my high school best friend, someone I hadn't seen in years. "Olivia?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Blinking in shock, I hastily wiped my eyes and stepped out of the car. "Ella, what are you doing here?" She pulled me into a tight embrace, her warmth enveloping me. "I manage this place now. What's going on? Are you okay?" At the genuine concern in her voice, something inside me broke. Before I knew it, I cried in Ella's arms, spilling out the entire story between sobs and shaky breaths. With each detail I shared, Ella's expression grew more serious as she listened intently. When I finally finished, she gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "You're not staying in this mess," she said firmly. "Come on, you and the kids can use my extra room." An hour later, after tucking the kids into warm, cozy beds, I found myself sitting at Ella's kitchen table, holding a cup of tea. The warmth of the mug grounded me as I stared into the swirling liquid, feeling lost. "So, what's your plan?" Ella asked gently. I sighed, still gazing down at my tea. I don't know. I just couldn't stay there any longer. But I know from Robert's messages that he's going to fight for the kids. Ella's eyes hardened with determination. Then you fight back, Olivia. You've always been one of the sharpest people I know. You can do this. I don't even have a lawyer, I admitted, the reality of my situation sinking in. The weight of it all felt crushing. Ella's lips curled into a sly smile. I think I can help with that. Do you remember Daniel from high school? My heart skipped a beat at the mention of his name. Daniel had been my secret crush for years. What about him? He's a divorce lawyer now, one of the best in the state, Ella explained, leaning in with a knowing look. And, if I recall correctly, he always had a thing for you. My cheeks flushed at the memory, and I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. How could I be thinking about an old crush while my marriage was falling apart? I can't afford a top-tier lawyer, Ella, I said, shaking my head. I've moved on from all of that. Ella waved off my concerns with a dismissive gesture. Let me talk to him. Just meet with him, please. For me. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another text from Robert. My hands trembled as I read it, my parents are worried. How could you do this to our family? You'll never see the kids again if you don't come home right now, I handed the phone to Ella, who read the message, her expression growing serious. That settles it. Daniel is the first person I'm calling in the morning. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The feeling of standing on the edge of a cliff haunted me. Meeting with Daniel felt like the final step, the moment where everything would change, where my marriage would truly be over. But as I thought about Robert's cold detachment and his parents' constant interference, I realized that our marriage had ended long before this. I just hadn't had the courage to admit it. The next morning, I heard Ella on the phone as I slowly made my way out of the bedroom. Yes, Daniel, she can meet you at 2 p.m. Thank you so much, she said before turning to face me with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Olivia, Daniel has agreed to meet with you today. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the turning point in my life and in my children's lives. Great, I said, my voice louder than I intended, betraying just how significant this moment felt. I hugged my sleepy kids and got ready for the day. As I did, something stirred inside me, hope, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. I no longer felt alone. No matter what challenges awaited, I was ready to fight for the life I deserved. When I arrived at Daniel's office, I smoothed down my shirt, trying to calm my nerves. He had changed from the bashful boy I remembered. When he stepped in, Daniel extended his hand with a confident yet comforting smile. It's been too long, Olivia. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. A familiar flutter stirred in my gut as we sat down, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about old crushes or what-ifs, this was about my future, and my children's future. Daniel listened intently as I explained my situation, his brow furrowing with each detail. When I finished, he leaned forward, his gaze intense. I won't sugarcoat this, Olivia. This is going to get tough, especially with Robert's parents involved and their resources. But I promise you, we will fight, no matter what. His words reignited a fire in me that had long been extinguished. How do we start? I asked. For the next hour, we discussed our strategy. As Daniel explained each step, I felt a spark of my old legal instincts returning. We went over every detail, preparing for the battle ahead. Just as we finished, my phone buzzed. Glancing at the screen, I said, "It's Robert. I need to take this." I stepped out of Daniel's office and answered the call. "Where are you, Olivia?" Robert's voice was calm but cold. "My parents are devastated. The children need to come home, now. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. No, Robert. I'm not coming back. I've hired an attorney. Please direct any further communication through him. There was a brief silence, then Robert's voice turned sharp and angry. Do you really think you can take my kids and get away with it, Olivia? I will ruin you. You'll be lucky if you ever see them again. The call ended abruptly, leaving me shaken. Daniel appeared beside me, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? He asked, concern etched on his face. I nodded, though tears I hadn't realized I was shedding trickled down my cheeks. He's threatening to take the children, I whispered, my voice trembling. Daniel's hands remained steady on my shoulders. We won't let that happen, Olivia. You're not alone in this. You're stronger than you realize. I looked into his eyes and felt a mixture of emotions, fear, gratitude, and something else I couldn't quite name. I took a step back, regaining my composure. What do we do next? Daniel's expression grew serious. We need to apply for temporary custody right away. And, Olivia, we need to talk about your career. Confused, I blinked. My career. But I left that behind, I said weakly. Daniel's voice turned firm. Exactly. And in court, that will be used against us. We need to show that you can support the kids independently. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had sacrificed everything for my family, and now that very sacrifice could cost me my children. Doubt crept in, and I whispered, I don't know if I can go back. Daniel's eyes hardened with determination. The Olivia I knew in high school could do anything she set her mind to. She's still in there. You just need to find her again. When I left Daniel's office that day, my head was spinning. The thought of rebuilding my career, fighting Robert and his parents, and protecting my kids felt overwhelming. But for the first time in years, I caught a glimpse of hope. That evening, as I tucked Lily and Tom into bed, Lily looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. When are we going home, Mama? My heart clenched. Oh, my sweet girl, I said softly, pulling her close. We're home now. Home is wherever we are, as long as we're together. I held her tightly and made a silent vow, I would build us a new home, one filled with love, respect, and stability. No matter how long it took or how hard the battle, I was ready. The old Olivia was coming back, and she was determined to reclaim her life. The next day, I stood outside the courtroom, gripping my suitcase as I tried to calm my nerves. The interim custody hearing was today, and I knew Robert and his parents would go to great lengths to take the kids from me. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You've got this, Olivia. Remember everything we've prepared for. I nodded, taking a deep breath as we entered the building. Inside, I spotted Robert, his parents, and their attorney huddled together. My anger flared when I saw my mother-in-law's smug expression. As the hearing began, I watched in growing fear as Robert's attorney painted me as an unstable, irresponsible mother who had abandoned her family on a whim. They twisted my decision to leave my job, using it to argue that I couldn't support my children. When it was our turn, Daniel defended me skillfully, emphasizing my successful legal career and my deep commitment to my kids. But despite his efforts, I couldn't shake the feeling of doubt as I noticed the judge's skeptical expression. Had I made a terrible mistake? During the recess, I overheard Robert's mother speaking loudly in the hallway. Once we get custody, we'll move in to help with the kids. They need a stable environment, not a mother who can't decide what she wants out of life. Her words shattered something inside me. I stormed over to her, anger boiling over before I could think twice. How could you? I growled. From the start, you've tried to push me out. Well, guess what? I'm done being treated unfairly. I'll fight with everything I have to keep my children. Robert's father stepped between us, his voice stern. Olivia, you're proving our point. You're unfit to be their mother. Before I could respond, I felt Ella's presence beside me, her eyes blazing with fury. She placed a firm hand on my arm. Leave her alone, she said coldly. You're not allowed to harass her anymore. As the tension grew, Daniel appeared, gently guiding me away from the escalating scene. This isn't helping, Olivia, he whispered. We need to focus on the hearing. But the damage had been done. When we re-entered the courtroom, I could feel the judge's critical gaze on me. My outburst had given Robert the advantage. The judge cleared his throat and spoke, his words tilting my world off its axis. Given the evidence and recent events, I'm inclined to grant temporary custody to the father, with supervised visits for the mother. I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. Daniel immediately requested a break, and the judge reluctantly agreed. We retreated to a private room, where I slumped against the wall, tears streaming down my face. Olivia, listen to me, Daniel said urgently. We still have a chance, but we need to adjust our approach. You have to show the judge that you're a stable, responsible parent who puts her kids first. I nodded weakly, my heart breaking. But Daniel, how can I let them take my babies? I can't lose them. His grip on my shoulders tightened as he looked at me fiercely. You won't. But I need you to pull yourself together. The Olivia I know doesn't give up. She doesn't let anyone push her around. Where is that Olivia? His words reignited something inside me, a small flame of determination piercing through the fog of despair. I straightened my back, wiping away the tears. She's here. And she's ready for battle. As we walked back into the courtroom, I locked eyes with Robert and his parents. Their smug expressions only fueled my resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about showing my kids that I could fight for them, that I could break free from the grip they had on my life. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders. The fight wasn't over, it was just beginning. And this time, I was ready. With my heart racing, I watched as the judge prepared to deliver his final decision. It had taken months of struggle, sleepless nights, and unwavering resolve to reach this moment. Across the room, Robert and his parents sat, their faces a mix of hate and confidence. The judge's voice echoed through the quiet courtroom. This court has carefully reviewed all the evidence presented in the matter of custody for Tom and Lily. Daniel's reassuring presence beside me steadied my nerves as I held my breath. Time seemed to freeze as the judge continued. Olivia Matthews will receive primary custody, with significant visitation rights granted to Robert Matthews. The specifics of the custody agreement. All I could focus on was the overwhelming sense of relief and vindication that washed over me. I heard Robert's mother gasp and saw the shock on Robert's face as he absorbed the outcome. Daniel glanced at me, his smile infectious and full of encouragement. It did more than just lift my spirits, it made my heart skip a beat. Outside the courthouse, Robert approached me, his parents standing a distance away. Olivia, I'm sorry for everything, he murmured softly. I nodded, surprised by the absence of anger in me. I'm sorry too, Robert. But this is what's best for all of us. As they walked away, I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders. I hadn't just won the custody battle, I had regained my independence. Ella rushed over, wrapping me in a tight hug. You did it, girl. I knew you could, she exclaimed. I laughed, tears of joy spilling down my cheeks. Ella, I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me hope when I had none. You saved me that night at the hotel. She squeezed my hand. That's what friends are for. Now, go enjoy this moment with your kids, and maybe with a certain handsome lawyer. I glanced over at Daniel, who was putting away his briefcase. Our eyes met, and a familiar flutter stirred in my stomach. His face flushed as we locked eyes. Later that evening, after a joyful reunion with Lily and Tom, I found myself sitting on Ella's porch, watching the sunset. Daniel joined me, carrying 2 glasses of wine. He handed me one and raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said with a smile. I grinned and clinked my glass against his. "To fresh starts." After a comfortable silence, Daniel spoke. "You know, Olivia, these past few months have shown me how incredible you are. You've changed so much since that first day in my office. You fought for yourself and your kids, and it's been inspiring to watch." Pride swelled within me as I nodded. "I'm not sure I've changed. I think I just found parts of myself that I thought were lost." Daniel reached out, gently touching my hand. His touch ignited something deep within me. "Maybe," he said softly, "we could have dinner sometime. Just the 2 of us. Now that the dust has settled." I looked into his eyes and saw warmth, admiration, and the possibility of something more. For a brief moment old doubts tried to surface, but I quickly remembered everything I had overcome. I smiled and murmured, "Yes, I'd like that." As I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, the hardships, the hopeless moments, and the triumphs, I watched the last rays of the sun paint the sky in beautiful hues. This journey had led me to this very moment, where I had regained my strength, my freedom, and a support system I hadn't realized I needed. Though the future remained uncertain, I felt more optimistic than I had in a long time. I still had my independence, my children, and maybe even the possibility of love ahead of me. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. As I savored my wine and felt the warmth of Daniel's hand in mine, I knew I was ready to embrace every second of this new chapter in my life.